Okay, I'm working out on the finish for Graycliff, and we found that the original finish was a shellac, which was very common for the time. So shellac comes in these kind of flakes, and traditionally it's dissolved in alcohol. So we're going to do the same thing. Now if you take the flakes and dissolve it, it actually takes a little longer. So what I do is I grind it up into kind of a powder, then add it to the alcohol, and I find it mixes a little bit better, and I don't have quite as long of a dissolving time. So just got to give it a couple seconds. It's ground up, kind of just looks like a dust now. I poured that into the alcohol, and we're going to use what they call a 2-pound mix. So it would be 2 pounds of shellac flakes to 1 gallon of alcohol. And then you can see it's on the bottom there. I just let that dissolve for a couple hours, and I'll start with that. So the first one, I did this about an hour ago, a couple hours ago, and this is about as light as you can get the shellac. It's refined, it's a little lighter than what they call a blonde shellac. This is an amber, or sometimes called an orange shellac. And then there's one step that's even darker. And typically we would guess that it was probably this amber or orange used at the time, but because we're dealing with some old pieces and some new pieces, we've chose to use some of the other shades to bring some of the newer pieces in a little darker to the older ones, and then some of them that have aged over time, I actually don't want to add any color to, so I've got it as clear as possible so that I don't change anything that already exists. So I'll show you this door over here. Okay, this is one of the existing door panels that's in the house. And all I want to do is try to get some of the wax off the surface. So I'm using some naphtha, which will dissolve the wax, but it won't really bite into the finish that's on there. And I'll just put it on real light, and I'm just trying to get all the wax that's on there and all the kind of grime that's built up over the years, and get this as clean as I can, the residue. And then I'm going to give it a real light scuffing up with a little bit of a steel wool just to get a little extra residue off. And then I'm going to go over this with that clear coat, and then I'll freshen up the color, and then this is going to be our base color that we're going to work the rest of the wood off of. Okay, I just gave it a light sanding with a 320, just kind of wiped over the top, and now I'm going over it with some fine steel wool. And I'll be sure that all the wax is off the surface so that the shellac can bite through into the old layer. Now, because alcohol dissolves shellac, even old existing shellac will get dissolved and the finish will bite into this old finish. But what I want to do is I want the surface prepped real nice and smooth so that there's no marks and there's no ridges or anything in it. Now, some of these light scratches and stuff, you'll see they'll dissolve right in. So that's pretty cleaned up. You can see just a little residue on there, so I'll wipe this off and then we'll get ready to shellac it. Okay, I've got the shellac dissolved here, and I'm gonna fill up, we usually call these our rubbers, and there's a wad of cotton and cheesecloth in the center, and then a linen around the outside. And what that does is it fills up the shellac, and then the pad gets wet here, and it only lets a little bit out to the surface. Gives you a nice controlled surface, and it keeps it nice and smooth. So you put a little pressure and you rub that on, and you can see how that starts bringing a nice glow to it. And this way you're not slopping a lot of finish on and changing the surface, but you're melting into that base coat, nice even smooth coats. And I'll go over the whole surface this way, and then once I'm done, this will be our finished surface that we're going to work off of to get the rest of it. I've got 3 coats on it so far, and this will be my last one. And you know, I'm just trying to freshen up the surface so I can get the color worked out, so I'm not going to really overdo it. But you can see just kind of a nice light touch. I'm squeezing a little bit of the shellac out as I go, keeping the surface wet. You keep it moving nice and smooth. Don't let get any drag marks or anything. And then that surface is getting polished right out, all the way across. And I'm squeezing it slightly as it's coming out. And that's it. So you can see how nice and smooth and even the polish looks. And this is the original color. And so this is all we need to go to. So here's some pieces. Here's some original molding over on this side. This molding here is the base molding in the house. We pulled it out. These pieces were stripped. And this is a new piece of molding that we ran. And what we're going to do is we've got to get this to this color. Now I've got 1 coat of boiled linseed on here. We're trying to use the same finishes that we're using the time. And also on these 2 pieces, I've got 1 coat of the boiled linseed. And you can see this is getting pretty close to that. And probably a couple coats of shellac on here would be pretty close. But this newer piece here is quite different. So the next coat of linseed, I'm going to put some natural tints in it and bring the color tones up to get me closer to this color here. So I'll show you those. Okay, I've got the boiled linseed, and you can see it has a nice amber tone to it, but you know, it'll add some color, but not quite as much as we need. So some of these natural pigments, this one is raw umber. You can see it kind of has a light brown tone to it, and it's from a mountainous region in central Italy, and actually the area is called Umbria. That's where you get the name for the color. And they're, you know, it's a mix of iron oxide and calcium carbonate, and actually has a little lamp black in it too. But I take these colors, these natural pigments, and what I'll do is I'll start out with just a little bit in there. I'll mix it, I'll test it, and I'll keep adding it to it until I get the tone I want. And then I'll probably add a little of the burnt umber, which is all they do is heat it up, and it gives it a little bit more of a reddish hue. And I think we're picking up some of that in the color. You can see that's a little bit deeper there. So I'll tone it with a little bit of that. And if it gets too far off the color, I can use some of this raw sienna and pull back some of the golden tones. So once I get this color recipe worked out, I'll put 1 more coat on this. This is already kind of sealed now. So the next coat will build up. It won't take in quite as deep, but it'll start giving us the tones we want. And then we'll finish it off with the shellac. Okay, I'm back to working on this stain. I mixed up my color last night, and I got my mix the way I wanted. And you know, we were fortunate, the general contractor, Jim Redden, when he had taken some doors off, behind the hinge plates, he saw some of the original color of the stain too. So that kind of helped us get in the right direction, and this looks really close to what we need. Now, if you look here and you can see all the variations, this piece in the front here is an original piece that was stripped and sanded. This is the piece when it was just stripped, and you can see how dark some of the colors that are still in there, because you still have some residue of stain and things in it. This is almost sanded down. This is our new wood, which has a bright golden tone to it. And then this is some of the old that was stripped, sanded, and I put 1 coat of the boiled linseed on it yesterday. Now I've got to let it set for 24 hours because not, you know, like some of the modern stains that we have today, they have agents in there that help it dry quickly, but with the linseed, if you try to do too much at once, you get kind of a gummy finish. So I let that set up real good and hard. And I'm going to take this piece here and I'm going to brush on some of the stain over the top. And you can see how it has that nice brown tone to it, almost a light walnut tone that you're picking up in the edge of the wood there. And I'll let that soak in a little bit and wipe it off. And what we want to do is you kind of want to sneak up on a color. You know, you don't want to do it all in one big heavy coat, and you know, because things can kind of run away with you a little there. But you can see how close that tone is. So I'll let that soak in a little bit, and then I'll wipe off the face. And then the same thing with some of the older wood. If you look here, you know, you've got some bright red tones in here, but you don't have that kind of nice deep brown in there. So that's what we're going to add to it. So I'll do the same thing with this one. What I'll probably do is I'll strike this one out a little quicker than that so it doesn't penetrate as deep. And I may have to do 2 coats on this. And then I'm thinking when it comes to the shellac, because we have 3 different colors in our shellac, we're going to help even out our tones with that too. So you can see this one, I'm going to probably wipe it off pretty quick. I don't need to let it set as long. But you can tell already, just with the natural pigments and the linseed, look how close, I'm getting real close to that color already. And then our newer piece here, wiping that off. It's just a little brighter, but it's in the same tone. So I'm going to experiment with a 3rd coat on that and letting it dry. Or what I may do is start off, instead of sealing it with a clear coat, I might start out with the color too and work that out. And then I'm pretty confident we'll get both of these to the same color before we start adding our shellac to it. Okay, so I can finish my experiments today. I put some stain on this piece and I force dried it with some heat and let it sit for a few hours just so I could keep the experiments going here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with the deeper tone of shellac, that garnet, which is this real deep. It has almost, well, you can see the color here, and look at how close that is to our finish. I'm going to start out with 1 coat of that and see how close I am. And I can, once I get it to where I want it, I'll finish it with the clear shellac, which won't add with hardly any color, but it'll help, you know, balance out the sheen. So you can see here, see even with that first coat, you can see how close we're starting to get. Now it looks a little brighter when it's wet, but as it dries out, it should get real close to that tone. We need just a little bit more of the brown in there, but I'll let this dry. In a couple minutes this will be dry. I'll put another coat on and I'll start working a little closer to that brown, and I think we have it. Well, with a little bit more experimenting, I worked out 2 stain colors. I've got this one here that you see has this kind of a light brown to it. I used a Van Dyke, a little bit of lamp black, and then a little raw sienna, which is a yellow tint, and that brought us into the color that we wanted there. And then this is the raw umber and burnt umber mix. So what I found is on the bare wood, if I used the raw and burnt umber combination, it brought it closer to the reddish tones that we saw in here. And then what I ended up doing was taking the Van Dyke and putting an even coat on all 3 of them, and it brought all these colors real close to this. So I'm pretty happy with our mix here. So what I'm going to do now is start putting some shellac on them. So I've got the rubber that you saw the other day there, and I'll just charge it with a little bit of the shellac. and then start wiping that on. Okay, a little bit light, I'll get a little bit more on there. So I'm starting out with the clear, and what I want to do is try to get a little bit of a sheen to it first, and then find out if I need to get a little bit of that orangish tone on. So I'm going to coat all three of these with a couple coats, get them sealed up, start seeing where my color tone lies, and then I'll add the orange, and if that's not strong enough I'll go with the garnet and try to pull us into our color.